Welcome to SBC This Week, a weekly news roundup from the Southern Baptist Convention, as well as guest interviews from today's top church leaders. I'm Brandon Porter. Laura Erlinson is here with me. How are you, Laura?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Happy Pie Day.
Yes, it is Pie Day. My kids were excited. They were going to eat pie at school. It's a big day.
Yeah. So, just to make sure everybody knows, today's March the 14th as we record this. 3.14 is pi. I don't really go beyond 3.14. That got me through whatever science class needed that, math class,
I think that's about all you need.
Yeah,
unless you're a physicist or something, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. So now, but when it comes to pi, I can like pie. I can talk to you a lot longer about that.
3.14 slices.
That's right. Oh, me. Well, hey, listen, SBC This Week is presented by the Tourism Ministry of Israel. We're going to tell you a little more about that in just a few moments. Obviously, Laura, big week for the SBC with the Department of Justice dropping their investigation of the SBC, all its entities, a complete drop of that investigation. We'll talk about that a little bit more later on. There is potentially an opportunity for pastors who have opted out of Social Security. There may be a window for you to opt back in if you're interested in that. What else, Laura? Other stories. The ERLC has been involved, come alongside, entered a brief in a Supreme Court case. So we're going to talk about that a little later. And then, of course, a history moment. You'll have that for us as well. Any tease there?
Let's see. It's I found a diamond in the rough. How about that?
Okay, interesting.
It's a little too punny, but you'll see.
Okay, all right. It'll make sense by and by.
Yeah.
So there you go. Well, listen, the Israel Ministry of Tourism is excited to announce a new exhibit at the Ben Gurion Airport that takes passengers on a journey through the history of the people of Israel. The new exhibition, entitled The Eternity of Israel, is a joint effort of the Israel Antiquities Authority, the Airports Authority, and the Israel Ministry of Heritage. The exhibition showcases breathtaking photographs from archaeological sites and significant moments of discovery during excavations. They'll be on display at the airport's exit passages through January of 2026. So if you go to visit the Holy Land, go through that airport in Israel, make sure that you check that out. You can get more information at holyland.israel.travel and begin your spiritual journey there today. We thank them for their sponsorship of SBC This Week. Well, Laura, let's start big story. And the DOJ closed their investigation of the SBC this week. Yeah,
it's the close of a 2.5-year chapter in the SBC. Of course, we all remember, maybe most of us remember, back in August of 2022, when the Department of Justice announced that it was going to be investigating the SBC and some of its entities, and we've kind of been following that along. Of course, there was really not much to tell for those 2.5 years. The DOJ is notoriously tight-lipped about their investigations. And so none of us really knew kind of what was happening, or we knew that people were being interviewed, and that was about it. And so the big news came down this week that investigation is now closed. We heard from our attorneys that it was closed and there were no additional charges filed. Now, we know even on the podcast last week, Jonathan Howe did the podcast with me last week because you were out, and we talked about the sentencing of Matt Queen.
That's right.
Who was charged with falsifying documents, lying to investigators. He pleaded guilty to that. As part of this investigation, he was questioned, and then some things happened in the course of that investigation that he was charged with some wrongdoing. But he has been sentenced, and that is the only charge to have come out of the investigation. So great news for the SBC, for the Executive Committee, for Southwestern Seminary. Just great news to kind of get this behind them.
Yeah, and of course that, I think you said it, but I just want to reiterate that charge against Matt Queen was not sexual abuse related. It was
Right.
through the process
Right.
of the investigation. So,
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And Dr. Orge said, he just kept it short and sweet. He said, "We're grateful that we can close this chapter in our legal proceedings and move forward."
Mm-hmm. So that is one major piece of the sexual abuse investigation process that comes to a closure. There are still some pending lawsuits, the one filed by David Sills against the SBC and the other by Johnny Hunt against the SBC. Those the Hunt case to play out this summer in court, and then the Sills case is scheduled for 2026, and so we'll continue to follow those at Baptist Press. But definitely a big closure for the SBC when it comes to the Department of Justice. All right, we mentioned earlier the potential. So this is in the works potentially. Maybe an opportunity for pastors if you've opted out of Social Security because of your housing allowance and you regretted that and you wish you could get back in. There may be an opportunity. We're learning Guidestone is a part of a conversation that is ongoing with lawmakers about maybe a one-time window for pastors to get back into Social Security.
Yeah, that's right. And I feel like this has a good shot. The bill is being sponsored in both the House and the Senate, and in each house, it's co-sponsored by each party. So in the Senate, Katie Britt from Alabama and Maggie Hassan from New Hampshire are co-sponsoring the Clergy Act is the name of the bill. And then another version of it has been introduced in the House by Republican Vince Fong from California and Democrat Mike Thompson, also from California. And so it feels to me like maybe this will actually get somewhere. And so what happens is a lot of ministers will opt out of Social Security and federal income taxes, but then in order to, like you said, for to have more take-home pay. But it results in more take-home pay, but it sacrifices a large part of their anticipated retirement income later on down the road. And so Guidestone, like you said, is working on this. They are prepared to help pastors through this journey if somebody does desire to re-enlist in Social Security. Hans Stillbeck, Guidestone president, said Social Security complements the retirement benefits that Guidestone provides. And so many pastors made the short-term decision to opt out without understanding the long-term implications of that decision. And so we'll see. Yeah, we'll continue to follow this as well and see what happens.
Yeah, very good. All right. We mentioned also at the top of the podcast. Anyway, we mentioned
They both work.
That's right. That the ERLC joined a Supreme Court brief for parents who wanted to opt out of an LGBTQ storybook time in their local school, in a public school, but they were denied the right to do that. Laura, it happened in Montgomery County, Maryland, where 3 and 4 year olds were being read a book, a board book. You know, if you have young children, you know exactly what that is, and some of the rest of us can remember. The book was called Pride Puppy, and those young children were asked to spot different objects, and so it's created in a fun setting, but it's set in a pride parade. And some parents objected to that, and not just Christian parents, but parents of several different faith groups objected to that. And the school board told them that they couldn't do that. And so the parents pushed back and took the school board to court. Again, that happened in Montgomery County, Maryland.
One of the things, Diana Chandler wrote a great story about this brief and this case. And I was actually sort of blown away. In the book, some of the things that the kids are asked to find in the scene at this pride parade are a lip ring and even underwear and leather and things. And I thought, even if it wasn't a pride parade, I wouldn't want my kids reading this book. That just seems, for 3 and 4 year olds, this is a board book. Yeah, really is astounding that they're trying to read this in school to young children, and that parents have no say in whether their child can be a part of that or not. So the ERLC is, like you said, filing a brief in the case. Miles Mullen was interviewed for this story there at ERLC. He said, as the Bible teaches, Southern Baptists believe that the family, not the government, is the foundational institution of society. And as the Baptist Faith and Message clearly states, it's the responsibility of parents to teach their children spiritual and moral values, not the state. So we'll follow this case as it goes and see. It's just kind of frightening to see that parents can't opt out of things like this in public school.
Yeah, well, the Supreme Court will decide that. Beckett Law is taking the lead. They're representing the parents in this case, and it is set to be argued in front of the Supreme Court April the 22nd. Of course, the Supreme Court releases their decisions then during the summer months of June and July. All right, so if you like statistics, sit up straight to the front of your chair. Here we go. Lifeway Research released an interesting story this week looking back at the data from the 2023 ACP. So this is not the new data. That data is just a few weeks away from its release, but this is looking back at last year's ACP data that was released in May of 2024. And Laura, it calls it a complicated picture of Southern Baptist churches.
Yeah, that's right. It takes a while to put this data together because you might think, well, why are we just now hearing about these statistics from 2023? And we got the overall ACP data from 2023 back, like you said, in May of last year. But then it takes a while. It takes months to really just drill down into that data and get a picture of kind of where Southern Baptists are growing, where churches are seeing an increase in baptisms or membership or different things. It takes a while to kind of analyze all that. So that's what we're seeing in this data or this story from this 2023 data. And it's kind of a mixed bag. Like you said, it's some good stuff going on. There's growth in the Northeast in the number of churches and in membership in among Southern Baptists in the Northeast. Other regions are not seeing that kind of growth. Smaller churches are an increasing percentage of Southern Baptist churches. In 2018, so 5 years prior to this data that we're talking about, 38% of congregations fell in the smallest category, which is fewer than 50 in attendance. But in 2023, 43% of churches in the SBC recorded fewer than 50 people in attendance. 7 in 10 churches see fewer than 100 people. And 27% average that 50 to 99 number. So that gives you kind of just an idea. And like we talk about a lot, that we call them our normative size churches in the SBC. The big churches are not the norm in the SBC. It's the smaller 100 and even less than 100 churches. Almost 4 in 5 Southern Baptist churches are indeed Southern Baptist churches that are in the South. There are 11% of them are in the Midwest, 9% in the West, 2% in the Northeast, and close to half are in suburban areas, which I felt like that sort of tracks with my experience and just what I see. Close to half are in the suburbs, 28% are in urban areas, and 27% in rural areas.
Yeah. It's interesting. Half of Southern Baptist congregations began in the 20th century. 21% started from 1900 to 1949, and 29% began from 1950 to 1999. About 27% date their founding before 1900.
Yeah.
While 23% started after the year 2000.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool. That almost a quarter of our churches have been founded in the last 25 years.
Yeah.
And honestly, since this is 2023 data, that might be bigger even because we're planning so many churches that might be a larger share even now. Yeah,
that's a good point. It'd be interesting to see that next year. Interesting. I thought about some Sunday school superintendents from years past that I've worked with, and in some of the data is it said around a third of churches draw fewer than half of their worship service attendees to Sunday school or other types of small groups. And so, we don't, I haven't been church attendance numbers. They used to be so prominent where there was a board up front and those numbers would be in front of people and or it was printed on the back of a bulletin. And just as things change, sometimes just we go digital. So there's the bulletin is different, if there is a bulletin at all. We don't see those numbers as often as we used to.
How many people were in worship? How many were in Sunday school?
Yeah. So this says, again, around a third of the churches drew fewer than half of their worship attendees to Sunday school or some other small group. But, Laura, I do see, so let me just read this. Again, this is where it's complicated, so let me just read what the good folks at Lifeway wrote. It says, since the pandemic, Southern Baptist churches have been baptizing more people. Baptisms increased by 26% from 2022 to 2023. That's combined with the 16% increase from 2021 to 2022. The SBC has seen a 47% increase over the past 2 years. That's really encouraging.
Well, and what else I loved was that you might just think, well, that's just because nobody was meeting in 2020 and 2021. So, of course, it's going to be an increase.
Right.
But it's not that. If you compare the 2023 numbers with 2018 numbers, the baptism rate is going up. Both the number of baptisms as well as the average per church, as well as the average per 100 people in a church. Now, it's still not where we might want it to be, and it's not maybe where it was decades ago, but it's a positive trend, and that's real encouraging.
Yeah, absolutely. So lots of great information there in this Lifeway Research piece. Highly commend it to you to go and find it at Baptist Press and dig into that and think about those numbers and, pray that the Lord would stir in your church and you would see some of these increases, and then also where there are opportunities to grow, that you could gather a group of folks and begin to think about how to attack those challenges. All right, another little bit of a stat here, Laura. This last week, the first week of March, Sin Network set a record with 217 newly endorsed church planters. Very exciting time.
Yeah, remember how we talked about all those churches that have been planted since 2000? Here we go.
There you go.
Here's some more. Yeah, that was a record at their Sin Network orientation. 217 church planners. They spoke at least 8 languages and represented 182 sending churches. 56 of them were Spanish speakers, which is a reflection of the Sin Network Espanol emphasis on reaching Hispanic potential church planners. Noah Oldham is the executive director of Sin Network, and he opened the event by assuring planters that when they plant with Sin Network, they will never go through the church planting journey alone. And I love that. I think that's true. That's why we do it. That's why we have Sin Network. So
absolutely, we
can plant these churches and then we can invest in them and not just leave them out there to fend for themselves.
Yeah, very important. Very important. All right, some state convention news, Laura, over from West Virginia, where Eric Ramsey has announced that he's not retiring, but he is transitioning out of that role. He's going back into the pastorate. He's going to go serve at First Baptist Church of Chakotah. I'm sorry if I didn't say that right. Chakotah, Oklahoma.
Hear from mad people in
that's
Oklahoma.
Okay. Well, I'm happy to have my pronunciation corrected. That's okay.
Yeah.
So I have stories from a few years in radio where I have butchered the best of them. So, it's
I think we all have stories.
Yeah, doing the best we can here. So Chakotah, Oklahoma First Baptist Church. Eric Ramsey is leaving the leadership post there at the West Virginia Convention of Southern Baptist and headed back there closer to family and looking forward to the opportunity to serve the local church in that, in a more close way. And so just grateful for all that he's done in West Virginia. I know
he really has done a lot.
I know the folks there are sad to see him leave.
And this is at least the third podcast in a row that we have talked about transitions in the state conventions and the leadership. So when you have 41 state conventions, you have a lot of transitions.
A lot of movement.
Yeah. So this is just another one of those. So we're thankful for the work that he did in West Virginia, wish him well, and then, of course, we'll be following the decision there in West Virginia as they elect a new leader here pretty soon, I guess. Yep,
absolutely. All right, at Southeastern Seminary, they are releasing a series of podcasts, Laura. They're calling the Milestone Podcast. And I tell you what, it's something. 1925. I'm not going to do the math here, but on and on as we go through this year. I should say 2025 is a big year for significant anniversaries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't even realize a couple of them, and that is that it's the 1700th anniversary of the Council of Nicaea, from which we get the Nicene Creed.
Right.
It's the 500th anniversary of sort of the recovery of believers' baptism and of the view that we take of the Lord's Supper as a symbolism and memorial, not literal. And I didn't even know that those had anniversaries, but they did. And so we're 500th of that. And then, of course, here in the SBC, we have some big ones that we've talked about a lot.
Yeah.
We're about to celebrate in June the 100th anniversary of both our Baptist Faith and Message, our Statement of Faith, and the Cooperative Program. So this podcast is sort of taking each of these and exploring them in a deeper way with some of the faculty members there at Southeastern and then some special guests. And I'm fascinated by it. I'm excited to listen to these episodes.
Yeah. And don't forget that 2025 marks the 75th anniversary of Southeastern Seminary.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, another big one. Yeah.
Yep.
A good
So
one.
another one there. All right. And then down in New Orleans at the Caskey Center for Church Excellence, that's a mechanism that they use really to try to reach their community, where seminary students go out and share the gospel, look for opportunities to evangelize folks. Well, they are celebrating 10,000 professions of faith as a result of more than 10 years of student evangelism efforts. And so, just a big congratulations and praise God.
Speaking of milestones, that's a big milestone right there, too.
Huge.
Yeah, 10,000. And they've had 87,000 gospel conversations.
Fantastic.
If you don't know what they do, the Caskey Center provides scholarships to seminarians there in New Orleans. But part of the criteria for getting the scholarship is you have to commit to engaging people with the gospel on a regular basis. And so that has resulted in 87,000 gospel presentations and now 10,000 professions of faith in 10 years. So pretty astounding.
That's awesome. So congratulations to them down at the seminary in New Orleans. All right. As for the SBC emphasis calendar, Laura, we are in the midst of Annie Armstrong Easter offering season, so don't forget about that. It's a little bit different this year. Easter is kind of late, and so this is a longer season, but Easter is April the 20th, and I know our church is talking about that already. The week of prayer was a couple of weeks ago, and so that season's ongoing. And then this Sunday, March the 16th, it's Church Planting Emphasis Sunday, so that connects back to what we were talking there with Sin Network just a little bit ago in the podcast. All right, a diamond in the rough. Here it is, this week's history moment.
Okay, this is Dateline March 15th, 1979.
Okay.
There's no byline. I don't know who wrote this, but the headline is, History Repeats. Donors give rings for missions.
Okay.
All right. I will read maybe the whole thing. It's pretty short.
Okay.
15 months ago, a dying 91-year-old woman touched the hearts of Southern Baptists when she gave her diamond solitaire engagement ring to be sold, and the money given, quote, to some young woman preparing for mission work, end quote. The Southern Baptist Home Mission Board received the ring. Staff members bought it and gave it to the board as a permanent display of sacrifice to missions. And so the staff members at the Home Mission Board bought the ring so they could display it there at their office. And so that's how so rather than them selling it just at auction or whatever, the staff actually got together and pooled their money to buy the ring so they could put it on display. Which I wonder if it's still around somewhere. I would need to ask somebody at NAM if they still have that ring somewhere on display. That'd be cool. So now, though, the more recent story here in March of 79, the SBC Foreign Mission Board and the Georgia Baptist Convention are recipients of similar anonymous sacrifices. At the Foreign Mission Board, a gold ring set with 12 single-cut diamonds arrived in an envelope wrapped in an ordinary paper towel. With it, a note said, "Use this for foreign missions only. God bless." There was no name, no address, no city. There wasn't even a legible postmark, leaving the gift completely anonymous. The handwriting had a feminine flair and was probably that of an older woman. And then 2 stunning diamond rings came to the Christian Index, Georgia Baptist newspaper, from a donor who signed herself simply Born Again. A note in the package told the editor, who at the time was Jack Harwell,
Okay.
to sell the rings and give the money to whatever person or program the Lord leads you to. The rings were appraised and sold, and the money was put in the endowment fund of the Christian Index, where its board felt that the money would undergird everything that the Index does to support Christian missions in Georgia and elsewhere. And which is still happening to this day. The Christian Index is still around and still sharing the gospel and sharing the story of Georgia Baptists, and it's just pretty exciting. I just thought that was really cool, and it made me wonder, do our mission boards and places still get gifts of that kind? Do they get sort of in-kind contributions like that?
Yeah.
Think valuable items like rings and jewelry and stuff. I haven't heard of that happening in modern times, but maybe it does. I don't know.
I think it probably does. Yeah. I think churches definitely do. I think folks donate things like that. So absolutely. Fascinating.
Well, apparently back in the 70s, there was a rash of people donating rings to SBC entities. So
interesting.
maybe we could get that going again. I don't know.
There we go. Maybe that could be a CP campaign that we could go forward with. So. Well, we definitely want to thank our friends at the Tourism Ministry of Israel for their sponsorship of SBC this week. Make sure to find this podcast at your favorite platform and subscribe to it there, or subscribe to our Baptist Press YouTube channel.
Yes, that's right. And as always, there were so many stories we didn't have time to talk about. We had some international news this week out of Syria, out of Nigeria. I think I'm even forgetting one or two. Just some important things that we don't always even have time to touch on this podcast. So you can find all that and much, much more at baptistpress.com. Thanks for listening.